Betrayed by a millionaire CEO, how she took down a millionaire CEO. Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, I'm so glad you found us. This is the place where love, passion, and powerful stories come to life. Before we dive into today's incredible story, let me take a moment to speak a blessing over you. I pray that love finds you in unexpected ways, that peace fills your heart, and that you are surrounded by people who truly cherish and uplift you. Now that you're covered in love and light, are you ready for a story that will touch your heart, stir your soul, and maybe even bring a tear to your eye? Let's dive into it. Ava had always believed in love, the kind that was unwavering, passionate, and strong enough to weather any storm. She had spent her childhood listening to the stories of her parents, who, despite their struggles, had built a life of warmth and devotion. So, when she met Ethan Carter, she thought she had found her own great love story. He was the kind of man who made women turn their heads when he walked into a room. With his striking blue eyes, effortless charm, and the quiet confidence of a man who had never been told no, Ethan had an aura of power that was impossible to ignore. But unlike other men in his world, men who flaunted their wealth with arrogance, Ethan had something else. He had her attention. Their first conversation had felt electric. "You're different from the people I usually meet," he had said, watching her intently across a candlelit table at a high-end restaurant. Ava had smiled, intrigued. "And how's that?" "You're not impressed by any of this?" He had gestured around. The expensive decor, the soft jazz playing in the background, the servers attending to them with precision. "You're not here for the money or the status. You're here because you actually want to know me." And he was right. Ava wasn't interested in his billionaire empire, his luxury cars, or his towering mansion. She fell in love with the way he made her feel, like she was the only woman in the world who mattered. Ethan showered her with affection, leaving little notes in her bag, surprising her with trips to places she had only dreamed of, and calling her in the middle of his busiest days just to say, "I miss you." The night he proposed, the world around them seemed to stand still. They were in Santorini, standing on a balcony overlooking the endless stretch of deep blue waters. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. Ava turned to find Ethan on one knee, holding out a ring, a breathtaking sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "Ava, I've never met anyone like you. You challenge me, you ground me, and you make me want to be a better man. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" Tears had welled in her eyes as she whispered yes, throwing her arms around him. The wedding was a grand affair, an elegant, dreamlike event filled with love, laughter, and the promise of forever. As she walked down the aisle, dressed in an exquisite lace gown, Ethan had looked at her as if she was the only thing that mattered. His love felt undeniable, unwavering. But love, as Ava would later learn, is not measured in grand gestures and whispered promises. It is measured in the quiet moments, in the choices we make every single day. And somewhere along the way, Ethan had stopped choosing her. At first it was the little things, the way he started answering her texts with one-word replies. The way his kisses became quick and distracted rather than slow and longing. The way he would roll over at night instead of pulling her close like he used to. Then it became more. Late nights at the office, business trips that seemed longer than necessary, events he attended without inviting her. "Ethan, are we okay?" she asked one night, as he sat across from her at dinner, scrolling through his phone. "Of course, Ava. Why wouldn't we be?" His voice was calm, but his eyes didn't meet hers. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to the fairy tale they had built. But the truth was clawing at her heart. One evening she prepared his favorite dinner, grilled salmon, garlic butter asparagus, and a bottle of wine they had shared on their honeymoon. She set the table beautifully, wearing the red dress he had once said made her look irresistible. She waited and waited. The clock struck 10 p.m., then 11. Finally, around midnight, she heard his car pull into the driveway. Relief flooded her, but when he stepped inside, she smelled it immediately, an expensive perfume that wasn't hers. "You're late," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I had a meeting," he replied casually, removing his jacket. "A meeting that lasted until midnight." "Yes, Ava. Not everything is about you." His tone was sharp, cutting through the fragile hope she had been clinging to. She swallowed the lump in her throat. The meal she had prepared sat untouched on the table, the candles melting into nothing. As weeks passed, the distance between them grew unbearable. Ethan stopped noticing her completely. He was surrounded by beautiful women at lavish parties, ones who fit the mold of his world, tall, slender, white. Women who made Ava feel like she was invisible. She tried to fight for their marriage. "Ethan, we need to talk." "Ava, not now. I'm exhausted." "Ethan, do you still love me?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if the question itself was ridiculous. And then, without hesitation, he said, "Ava, stop being so needy." Her heart shattered in that moment. Because it wasn't just about the words, it was about the fact that he no longer saw her. The man who once worshipped her now barely acknowledged her, and the worst part, he didn't even care. Ava lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love could disappear so quickly. And for the first time in her life, she realized something painful, but necessary. Loving someone with your whole heart means nothing if they don't love you back. And no matter how much she wanted to fight for their marriage, no matter how much she wanted to believe in the man who once held her like she was his entire world, she knew. Ethan had already let go. Ava had always believed that silence could be peaceful, that two people in love could sit together, say nothing, and still feel completely connected. But this silence, the one creeping into her marriage, was different. It was cold, distant, and filled with 1,000 unspoken words that screamed louder than any argument ever could. She first noticed the change in small, almost imperceptible ways. Ethan stopped asking about her day. His kisses, once tender and filled with longing, became mere formalities. He no longer looked at her the way he used to, as if she were the only woman in the world. At first, she told herself it was just stress. After all, running a multi-million-dollar company wasn't easy. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the truth became undeniable. Ethan was pulling away, and he wasn't coming back. One evening, she sat on the living room couch waiting for him. The clock struck 9 p.m., then 10, then midnight. The lavish dinner she had prepared sat untouched on the table, the candles burning down to their wicks. She called his phone. No answer. She texted. No reply. When he finally walked through the door at nearly 2 a.m., he smelled of expensive cologne, whiskey, and something else. Something that made her stomach twist in knots. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice laced with exhaustion. "Out." His answer was short, dismissive, as he tossed his jacket onto the couch. "Out where, Ethan?" He sighed, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. "Ava, do we really have to do this right now?" Her heart clenched at the indifference in his tone. "Yes, we do." He rolled his eyes. "I was at an event. Just a business thing." "A business thing that lasted until 2 in the morning?" Ethan exhaled sharply, annoyed. "I don't have to explain my schedule to you. I work hard. I deserve to unwind." Ava swallowed hard, feeling like she was speaking to a stranger. "Who was there?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "Who was at the event, Ethan?" A flicker of hesitation crossed his face before he turned away. "Business partners, investors, people I actually enjoy being around." Her breath caught in her throat. "People I actually enjoy being around." The words stung like a slap to the face. "You don't enjoy being around me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan scoffed. "Ava, don't be dramatic." Dramatic. That was what he called her now when she voiced her pain. He walked past her, heading straight to the bedroom, leaving her standing there, alone, confused and heartbroken. From that night on, things only got worse. Ethan started spending more and more nights out. He stopped pretending to care. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, became a cold, lifeless mansion where they lived as strangers. Ava saw the photos before she heard the rumors. A picture surfaced online. Ethan at an upscale club, a glass of whiskey in one hand, and a stunning blonde woman draped over his other arm. She was laughing, her fingers grazing his chest in a way that was far too familiar. The caption beneath the image read, "Ethan Carter spotted partying in LA with a mystery woman, trouble in paradise." Ava stared at the screen, her hands trembling. The man in the photo, with his dazzling smile and relaxed posture, was unrecognizable. He wasn't the Ethan she had married. He didn't even try to hide it. She confronted him that evening. The image still burned into her mind. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ethan, sitting on the edge of their bed, looked up from his phone. He didn't even flinch. "Just a friend," he said casually. "A friend?" Ava scoffed. "Because friends touch each other like that? Friends stare at each other like they're about to—" "Ava, enough." His tone was sharp, cutting through her like a blade. "No, Ethan, not enough. You've been disappearing every night. You barely speak to me. And now you're all over the internet with, 'I told you it's nothing.' Then why do I feel like I've already lost you?" Silence. The worst kind of silence. Ethan didn't even try to argue. He didn't try to hold her, to assure her, to tell her she was wrong, because she wasn't. She had already lost him. He left again that night, and the next, and the next. She stopped waiting for him, stopped calling, stopped hoping, but nothing prepared her for what came next. One afternoon she walked into their bedroom and noticed something strange. The closet, Ethan's side, was half empty. His expensive suits, his leather shoes, his custom-tailored shirts, gone. A sinking feeling gripped her chest. She heard the front door open and hurried downstairs, her heart pounding in her ears. There he was, Ethan. Standing in the entryway, a manila envelope in his hand. His expression was unreadable. "What is that?" she asked, though deep down she already knew. He extended it toward her. "It's over, Ava." She blinked, her breath catching in her throat. "You're divorcing me?" "We both knew this was coming." Number. She hadn't known. She had held on to hope, onto the belief that the man she loved was still somewhere inside him. But she had been wrong. The betrayal wasn't just in his affairs, in his coldness, in the way he had stopped looking at her. It was in the way he had planned his exit without even telling her. It was in the silence he had let grow between them until it became unbearable. Ava stood there holding the papers, her hands trembling. And for the first time in months, she felt something new. Not sadness, not pain, but rage. Ethan had discarded her like she was nothing. But one day soon, he would regret it. And when that day came, she would make sure he saw exactly what he had lost. Ava stood in front of the tall windows of their luxurious penthouse, staring blankly at the city lights. The skyline stretched endlessly, glittering with life, but inside this home, inside her heart, everything had dimmed into darkness. For months, she had endured the painful silence, the cold indifference, and the quiet betrayals. Ethan had stopped seeing her, not just physically but emotionally. She was no longer the woman he had once adored, no longer the wife he had whispered promises to under the stars. And then it happened. It was a rainy evening when Ethan finally made his decision. Ava had been sitting at the dining table, waiting for him like she always did, though she knew by now he wouldn't come home early. The untouched meal before her had long gone cold, much like the love between them. The front door creaked open, and she turned her head, her heart momentarily lifting. But the moment she saw Ethan's face, she knew. He was different tonight. His expression was unreadable, his posture firm, his eyes distant. And then she noticed something in his hand, a manila envelope. Her stomach twisted. "What is that?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Ethan walked toward her, his expensive leather shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. He set the envelope down on the table in front of her, exhaling as if he were finally freeing himself from some unbearable weight. "It's time, Ava," he said, his voice void of any emotion. She stared at the envelope, her pulse pounding in her ears. "What do you mean, it's time?" she whispered, though her trembling hands already reached for the papers, her soul already bracing for the inevitable pain. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I think we both know this isn't working. I want a divorce." Ava flinched, as if the words had physically struck her. A divorce. She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation, any trace of the man who had once held her in his arms and called her his everything. But there was nothing. "Ethan," her voice broke. "After everything we've been through, after everything I've given up for you, this is how it ends." He exhaled sharply, as if he was the one suffering. "I don't want to hurt you, Ava, but let's be honest, we're not happy. I've changed. You've stayed the same." Stayed the same. She blinked, trying to understand. What does that even mean? Ethan glanced away, rubbing the back of his neck. "I need someone who fits my life now. Someone who—" He hesitated, then continued, "understands my world." Ava's breath caught in her throat. "Someone who understands your world," she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "You mean someone whiter?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, and in that silence she had her answer. Her heart shattered, not just because he was leaving her, but because he had made up his mind long before this moment. The distance, the affairs, the nights out, it had all been leading to this, and she had been foolish enough to believe he might still choose her. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the cold, lifeless legal terms that would officially sever their bond. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "You've already signed it," she murmured. Ethan nodded. Yes, of course he had, because this wasn't his heartbreak, it wasn't his world crumbling. He had already moved on, probably with one of those women draped around his arm at those late-night parties. Ava inhaled deeply, willing herself not to cry. She would not beg. She would not shatter in front of him. With steady hands, she picked up the pen. "That's it?" she asked, looking up at him one last time. He shrugged. "It's for the best. The best. For him. Not for the woman who had stood by him when he was just a man with a dream. Not for the woman who had held his hand through every triumph, every failure, every lonely night, when the weight of the world threatened to crush him. He had discarded her, like she was nothing." Ava swallowed her pain, lifted her chin, and pressed the pen to the paper. She signed her name with bold, deliberate strokes. And then she pushed the papers back to him, her face unreadable. "I hope she was worth it," she whispered. Ethan barely reacted. He simply took the envelope and turned away, heading for the door. But before he left, he paused. "I'll have my lawyer handle the settlement. You can keep the penthouse for a few months until you figure things out." Ava let out a bitter laugh. "How generous of you." Ethan sighed, but he didn't argue. With a final nod, he stepped out, leaving her standing there, alone, heartbroken, but not defeated. She listened as the door closed behind him. Ava wanted to scream, to break something, to collapse onto the floor and cry until the pain swallowed her whole. But she didn't. Instead, she stood there, breathing deeply, gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. She wouldn't give Ethan or the world the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. She was more than the woman he had discarded. She was more than a forgotten love story. And one day, she would prove it. Not for him, for herself. The penthouse, once filled with luxury and warmth, was no longer hers. Ava walked out of that towering glass fortress with nothing but a single suitcase, holding the fragments of a life she no longer belonged to. The city, once a place where she lived as a millionaire's wife, now seemed vast and unwelcoming. She had no home, no wealth, and worst of all, no one to turn to. Her family had warned her. Her friends had cautioned her. They had seen the signs of Ethan's coldness long before she was willing to admit them. And now, as she dragged her suitcase down the rain-soaked pavement, she realized how utterly alone she was. For days, she stayed in a cheap motel, surviving on instant noodles and the painful silence of regret. She would stare at the ceiling, her mind replaying every choice she had made, every ignored warning, every blind moment of love that led her here. But she refused to cry. Crying wouldn't fix anything. Crying wouldn't put food on her table. Crying wouldn't rebuild her life. So one morning she stood in front of the mirror, looked into her own tired eyes and whispered, "You are not broken. You are not weak. You will rise again." And with that, she walked out into the world to find a job. Finding work, however, was harder than she expected. Despite her intelligence, her degree, and the skills she had gained over the years, she was met with rejection after rejection. Doors that once opened effortlessly when she was Ethan's wife were now slammed in her face. The very people who had praised her at gala events now barely acknowledged her. "We're not hiring right now. We're looking for someone with more experience. Unfortunately, we've chosen another candidate." It was humiliating. After another long, exhausting day of job hunting, Ava found herself wandering the streets, her stomach empty, her spirit drained. As she walked past a small tuck shop, she noticed a faded sign on the window. It wasn't what she had imagined for herself. She had been married to a millionaire. She had lived in wealth, attended high-class events, worn designer dresses, and now she hesitated. But then she reminded herself, pride wouldn't put food on the table. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The owner of the tuck shop was an elderly woman named Margaret, who had spent decades running the little store on the corner. She eyed Ava curiously as she filled out the application. "You ever worked in a shop before?" Margaret asked, adjusting her glasses. Ava hesitated. "Number, but I'm a quick learner." Margaret looked her up and down. She could tell Ava wasn't from this world. The soft hands, the expensive but now slightly worn-out clothes, the way she carried herself like someone who once had more but had lost it all. "You got a husband?" Margaret asked bluntly. Ava stiffened. "No." Margaret nodded knowingly, as if she understood more than Ava was willing to say. "All right," she finally said. "You start tomorrow. Pay's low, hours are long. You sure you can handle it?" Ava straightened her shoulders. "I can handle anything." The first few weeks were brutal. Ava went from a life of luxury to sweeping floors, stocking shelves, and handling impatient customers. The long hours left her exhausted, her feet aching, her hands sore from handling cash and lifting heavy boxes. But she never complained. She woke up at dawn, walked to the store, and worked tirelessly. She learned how to manage inventory, handle difficult customers, and even fix the old register when it malfunctioned. For the first time in years, she earned her own money. The pay was meager, just enough to afford rent in a small, run-down apartment. But it was hers. No man controlled it. No one could take it away from her. And with each passing day, she grew stronger. One evening, as she locked up the store, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass door. She wasn't the same woman who had walked out of that penthouse with nothing. She was leaner, stronger, and fiercer. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined her. She was no longer Ethan's discarded wife. She was Ava, the woman who refused to be broken. And as she turned away from the glass, she knew. This was just the beginning. She was starting over, and one day the world would know her name again. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Ava had settled into a rhythm: work, home, repeat. The pain of the past still lingered, but she had learned to live with it. She had stopped looking back until one evening when her mother called her unexpectedly. "Ava, we need to talk." Her mother's voice was firm yet gentle. Ava sighed, already sensing what was coming. Her parents had been worried about her ever since the divorce, watching her struggle to rebuild her life. And now, they wanted to intervene. "Mama, if this is about my life—" "Just come home for dinner," her mother insisted. "Please, your father and I just want to see you." Ava couldn't refuse her mother's plea, so she agreed. That evening, as she stepped into her childhood home, the warmth of familiarity wrapped around her. The scent of home-cooked meals, the sound of laughter from her younger siblings, the comforting embrace of a place untouched by betrayal. For a moment, she felt safe, but that feeling shattered the moment she noticed an unfamiliar face sitting at the dinner table. A young man, dark curls, warm brown eyes, dressed in simple but clean clothes, his hands calloused from hard work, rested nervously on his lap. Ava's heart sank. "Mama," she whispered through clenched teeth, "what is this?" Her mother simply smiled. "Ava, this is Liam." Liam. A 25-year-old delivery boy, humble, hard-working, nothing like Ethan. Ava's stomach twisted. "Mama," she tried again, "We didn't arrange anything," her father cut in, his deep voice calm but firm. "We just thought maybe you two should meet." Ava turned to Liam, who looked just as uncomfortable as she was. He cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "Look, I know this is unexpected. I don't want to pressure you into anything." His voice was steady but kind. "Your parents they care about you, and they thought maybe you needed a friend." A friend. Ava studied him. His eyes, unlike Ethan's, held no arrogance, no judgment, just sincerity. She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing just a little. "Fine, let's eat." As dinner went on, Ava found herself listening more than she expected. Liam wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, but he was real. He spoke about his job, delivering packages day and night to support his mother and younger siblings, about how he had dreams, not of wealth, but of stability, of love, of a family. "I don't have much," he admitted, "but what I do have, I give with my whole heart." Ava felt something stir in her. Ethan had given her everything but his heart. And here was Liam, offering nothing but his sincerity. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about him. A man who worked under the scorching sun while Ethan had lounged in air-conditioned offices. A man who spoke of love as a responsibility, not a fleeting pleasure. A man who saw her, not as a possession, but as a person. She wasn't ready for love. But maybe love wasn't about being ready. Maybe love was about choosing the right person. So, when Liam called the next day, his voice hesitant, asking if she'd like to see him again, she said yes. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. The weeks turned into months. Each passing day brought new challenges, but also a growing sense of peace Ava hadn't known in a long time. When she had first agreed to see Liam again, it had been a tentative choice, driven by a simple desire to meet someone new, to break the suffocating chains of her past. But as time went on, she found herself slowly but surely opening her heart, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Unlike her past marriage, where Ethan had showered her with empty words and meaningless gestures, Liam's love was a quiet, unwavering force that built steadily over time. There were no grand gestures or dramatic declarations, just small moments, simple moments, that spoke volumes about the depth of his care for her. Every morning, without fail, he would send a message, no matter how busy he was. Sometimes it was just a few words, but those words always made Ava feel like she was the most important person in his world. "Good morning, Ava. I hope today's a good one for you." She would often smile at the thought of him, thinking how easy it was to forget what it felt like to be cared for in such a genuine, no-strings-attached way. There was no expectation that she needed to respond immediately, no rush to start a conversation. And in the evenings, when she'd finish her long hours at the tuck shop, Liam would sometimes show up at her door, not to ask for anything, but simply to see her, to check on her, to offer support without saying a word. "You've been working hard today, haven't you?" he'd say, his voice soft yet knowing. "I brought your favorite, thought you might want to take a break." He'd hand her a small bag of her favorite snacks, and it wasn't about the food, it was about the thoughtfulness behind it. And when they sat together, he wouldn't try to impress her with stories of his success, because he didn't have grand tales to tell. He would tell her about his day, his dreams, his fears, his humanity. There was no pretense, and that was the part of him Ava came to love most. Liam treated her with a respect that felt foreign, almost strange at first. When they went out to eat, he never made her feel less because of their financial situation. He didn't choose the most expensive restaurant to show off, nor did he shy away from the places that were simple and humble. His choices spoke volumes. He respected her ability to enjoy the small things, the quiet pleasures of life. When they sat together, sharing a small plate of food on a park bench because they couldn't afford fancy meals, he would smile at her and say, "I don't care what we eat, Ava. I care about who I'm eating with." It wasn't about what they had or didn't have. It was about what they were building together. A relationship founded on understanding, respect, and mutual care. One night, as they sat on the steps of a small cafe, watching the world go by, Ava found herself lost in thought. The weight of her past had lingered, sometimes so heavy she wondered if she'd ever truly be free of it. Liam turned to her, sensing the shift in her mood. "Hey," he said softly, his voice gentle. "What's going on in that beautiful mind of yours?" Ava chuckled faintly, the sound feeling strange after so long. She was used to carrying everything inside, to shouldering her pain alone. But Liam made her feel like she didn't have to carry the burden anymore. "I was just thinking about how different this feels," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam didn't ask for more. He simply nodded, giving her the space to say what she needed. He never pushed her for answers, never demanded she open up, but when she was ready, he was there, quietly present, never trying to be anything more than the person she needed him to be. Over the next few weeks, the little things became more significant to Ava. She found herself relying on Liam in ways she never thought possible. One rainy evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, she stood outside the tuck shop, staring at the pouring rain, realizing she had forgotten her umbrella. The chill of the air seeped into her skin as she pulled her coat tighter, preparing herself for the miserable walk home. But then, as if on cue, a familiar figure appeared through the haze of rain. Liam. He had dashed out from his work, drenched from head to toe, but with a look of determination on his face. "I wasn't going to let you walk home in this," he said simply, his smile warm despite his soggy clothes. Ava felt her heart swell with emotion. "You didn't have to." "I know, but I wanted to," he replied. "Come on, let's get you home." They walked side by side under the same umbrella, the rain cascading down around them, but Ava didn't care. She didn't care about the wet clothes, the inconvenience, the cold. All that mattered was this moment, the care, the love, the respect. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an afterthought. She didn't feel like someone to be tossed aside when things got difficult. She felt cherished. A few weeks later, after another long day at work, they sat together on a rooftop, staring out at the skyline. The world was quiet. The streets below were bustling, but up here it was just the two of them, the hum of the city fading into the background. Liam turned to her, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to find the right words. "Ava," he said, his voice so soft, so sure, "I know I don't have much to offer in terms of money, but I have everything that matters to me. My heart, my time, my loyalty, those are yours, always." The sincerity in his eyes, in his words, made Ava feel like she had found something she never thought possible, a love that didn't seek anything in return. It wasn't about what he had or what he could give her. It was about what he already gave, his undivided respect and loyalty. Her eyes filled with tears, tears she hadn't cried in a long time. "I think I'm ready to love again," she whispered. Liam's hand gently cupped her face, wiping away the tear that had escaped her eye. "Then we'll do it together," he said, pulling her into his arms. As she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Ava knew that this was love, not the fleeting, conditional love she had once known, but something much deeper, something built on trust, respect, and understanding. Liam's love was steady, gentle, and kind. He was everything Ethan never was, everything she had ever needed. Ava had finally found a man who saw her for who she truly was and loved her for it. And for the first time in years, she felt whole again, free from the pain of her past. Together they would build a future, one where love wasn't just a feeling, but a foundation, strong and unshakable. The world they had once known felt like a distant memory now, no longer dominated by the weight of their past failures, but driven by the burning desire to build something real, something lasting. Ava and Liam, both humbled by their own struggles, knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But as long as they had each other, they were prepared to face whatever came their way. The idea of starting a business had been planted in their minds months ago. After long talks and brainstorming sessions, they had decided on something they both knew could succeed, something they could pour their hearts into, something that could transform their lives forever. They wanted to create a space that would be more than just a place to sleep, a place that would make people feel like they belonged, that would inspire warmth and comfort in their hearts, a hotel, but not just any hotel, a sanctuary built on love, respect and understanding. It was not an easy decision. Neither of them had the resources to get started, but their determination outweighed any doubt that crept into their minds. Ava had always been a fighter, but with Liam by her side, that fight became something even more powerful. It was no longer about just surviving. It was about thriving. The vision they had for the hotel became their guiding light. Together, they made a promise to never let the weight of the world crush their dreams. They were starting at the very bottom, but they saw no reason why they couldn't build a future. It wasn't about the money, the lavishness, or the status. It was about the opportunity to create something meaningful, something they could be proud of. Together, they would rise. Their first steps were small, finding the right location, negotiating with landlords, figuring out the logistics of running a business, but each victory, no matter how small, felt monumental. Late nights spent sketching blueprints, visiting properties, and discussing design ideas. Each day brought a new challenge, but also a new moment of joy as they saw their dream slowly take shape. There were days when they couldn't see how they would get through. Ava had to handle the finances, doing everything she could to stretch every dollar, while Liam worked tirelessly to make the hotel space livable. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, fixing leaks, laying flooring, painting walls, whatever it took. Together, they were unstoppable. Despite the financial burden, they never let the stress tear them apart. Instead, they took solace in the quiet moments, when they sat together on the dusty floor, taking a break from their grueling tasks, and talked about their future. They shared their fears, their dreams, their moments of doubt, but they always ended those conversations with one unwavering truth. They were in this together. Ava would often find herself looking around, seeing their sweat and hard work all around them, and it filled her with a sense of pride. They were building something real, together, and it was theirs to claim. Every task was a test, not just of their physical stamina, but of their relationship. But in those quiet moments when the dust settled and the hotel's true potential began to shine through, Ava and Liam were reminded of why they were doing this. Their love was the foundation of everything they had created. It wasn't just a hotel. It was their hotel, built with their own two hands, their shared sweat, and the shared vision of a future they could be proud of. The work was exhausting. There were nights when Ava could barely keep her eyes open, but she always found a way to keep going. Liam was her rock, never once questioning her ability, never once faltering in his belief in her. His support became her fuel, and together they pushed forward, one day at a time. As the months passed, their hotel slowly began to take shape. The walls, once empty and barren, now seemed to hum with life, a symbol of their journey. Each piece of furniture, every carefully chosen accent, was a representation of their dreams. The floors they had polished were more than just wood. They were the foundation of their future, and every decision they made brought them closer to the success they both longed for. But as the hotel began to look more like a business, it still felt like home to them. Just as much as it was their place of work, it was a space that held their memories and hopes. Every corner was filled with a piece of their story. They put everything they had into it, every ounce of their passion, and it was beginning to show. Despite the struggles, the moments of doubt, and the harsh reality of starting from scratch, Ava and Liam had something others didn't. They had each other. Their partnership was the most valuable thing they had. It was built on mutual respect, on love that was tested by adversity, and on an unwavering belief in one another, even in moments when the future seemed uncertain, when they were unsure if they could make ends meet. Ava never gave up. She believed in the dream they shared, in the future that could be theirs if they persevered. Her faith in Liam and in their shared mission gave her the strength to keep moving forward. And Liam, he never let his doubts or insecurities show. He was a quiet force, the calm in their storm, always pushing forward, even when it seemed like they were at the brink of failure. His faith in Ava never wavered, and it was in that trust that they both found the courage to keep going. They supported each other in ways neither had ever imagined. Liam would wake up early to handle the business side of things, running errands, contacting suppliers, handling logistics. Ava would take charge of the financials and marketing, ensuring they had the resources they needed to keep the hotel running. Together, they became the heart of the hotel. It was their labor of love. As the grand opening day drew closer, Ava and Liam couldn't help but feel the weight of their accomplishment. All the sleepless nights, the endless meetings, the frustration, it was all coming to a head. They were about to open the doors to a new chapter in their lives. But this wasn't just about opening a hotel. It was about a new beginning, a new life built on trust, hard work, and love. On opening day, the hotel looked nothing short of perfect. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a reflection of everything they had worked for. Every detail had been carefully chosen, every corner carefully crafted. As they welcomed their first guests, they couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Later that evening, as the hotel hummed with energy and laughter, Ava and Liam stood side by side, taking it all in. The dream they had once talked about, now a reality. Looking at Liam, Ava felt the weight of her journey lift from her shoulders. They had done it. Together. Ava turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude and pride. "We did it, Liam. This is our dream." Liam smiled, taking her hand in his. "No," he said softly. "This is just the beginning, Ava. Together, we've only just begun." And as they stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by the life they had built, Ava realized that it wasn't about the hotel, the money, or the future. It was about the partnership they had created, an unbreakable bond forged through love, respect, and unshakable trust. Together they would continue to build. Together they would conquer the world. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Liam by her side, Ava knew there was nothing they couldn't overcome. She had found her true home, not just in the hotel, but in Liam's arms. This was love, this was life, and this was their future. 3 years had passed, and every inch of progress felt like a victory. The road they had traveled was long, and the battles they had fought were many, but the fire that had ignited in Ava and Liam never dimmed. It only grew stronger with each passing day. They had started with nothing, no resources, no backing, just a dream and an unbreakable belief in each other. Their journey had been built on determination, hard work, and sacrifice. Ava and Liam had spent countless hours working at the hotel, ensuring that every detail was perfect. They poured their hearts and souls into every corner of their business, never once doubting that they were on the right path. But it wasn't just their work ethic that had set them apart. It was their partnership, their shared vision for the future, and the mutual respect they had built from the very beginning. In the early days, it seemed as though success was always just beyond their reach. There were moments when their bank accounts were nearly empty, and the pressures of the business weighed on them heavily. But instead of retreating or giving up, they dug in their heels. They did whatever it took to keep the business afloat. Ava handled the finances with precision, cutting costs where she could, while Liam tirelessly worked on improving the hotel's service and ambiance. He believed in the experience they could offer their guests, and he did everything in his power to bring that vision to life. Through the sleepless nights and the endless work days, they never let each other fall. When one of them was ready to give up, the other would lift them up. Together, they had become an unbreakable force, something that no obstacle could tear apart. It wasn't long before they began to see the fruits of their labor. Slowly at first, then more rapidly, word began to spread about their hotel. Guests came from near and far, leaving rave reviews about the beautiful accommodations and the warmth of the staff. They spoke not just about the hotel's physical beauty, but about the care and attention that was given to every aspect of their stay. Ava and Liam had created something special, not just a place to sleep, but a place where people felt valued, respected, and appreciated. The guests weren't just coming for luxury, they were coming for the experience. They were coming because Ava and Liam's hotel wasn't just another business. It was a reflection of the couple's journey. It was a place that celebrated resilience, love, and the unyielding belief that anything was possible. As more and more people visited, the hotel's reputation grew, and so did its success. With each passing month, the hotel grew in popularity. They expanded their services, offering more rooms, better amenities, and exclusive packages that made their guests feel truly special. Soon, the small hotel was no longer enough to meet the demand, and Ava and Liam made the bold decision to expand into a full-fledged hotel chain. The dream that had once seemed so distant was now well within their grasp. The process of expansion wasn't easy. There were more challenges to face, new locations to scout, more staff to hire, and more logistics to manage. But Ava and Liam faced each hurdle with the same determination and resolve that had brought them this far. Every new hotel they opened was a testament to their journey, a reminder of how far they had come from the days when they had nothing. At the same time, they had begun to diversify their investments. They expanded into new areas of business, real estate, travel, and even technology. Each new venture was built with the same care and vision they had for their hotel, and with Liam's brilliant business sense and Ava's keen eye for detail, their empire began to grow rapidly. The couple, once struggling to make ends meet, were now on the path to becoming true millionaires. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about empowerment. Ava, who had once been abandoned by a man who didn't see her worth, had now created something extraordinary. She had built an empire with a man who not only saw her worth, but respected her strength, intellect, and ambition. Together, they had proven that love and hard work could turn even the most difficult circumstances into success. As their wealth grew, so did their sense of responsibility. Ava and Liam were no longer just focused on their own success. They were committed to helping others. They began to invest in their community, providing jobs and resources to those who needed them most. They gave back to the very people who had supported them in their journey, ensuring that others had the same opportunities they had been given. The hotel empire that Ava and Liam had built became more than just a business. It became a symbol of resilience, of rising above adversity, and of doing what others said couldn't be done. They had come from nothing, and now they were standing tall, showing the world that love, hard work, and respect could lead to extraordinary success. On the day they celebrated their 3rd anniversary of their first hotel's opening, Ava and Liam stood side by side in the lobby of one of their newest hotels. It was a moment of reflection, a chance to look back on everything they had accomplished. The grand chandelier sparkled above them, and the bustling guests, who had no idea of the journey it had taken to get there, passed by them, checking in, laughing, enjoying the beauty of the hotel. Ava looked at Liam, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had always dreamed of this moment, but she never could have imagined it would come true in the way it did. This wasn't just her success, this was their success. This was the culmination of everything they had built together. She turned to him, her voice full of emotion. "I can't believe we did it, Liam. Look at all we've built. Look at all we've overcome." Liam smiled, a soft, proud smile. He took her hand, holding it tightly. "We didn't do it alone. We did it together." And as they stood there, in the heart of their empire, surrounded by the fruits of their labor, they knew they had truly risen from the ashes. Together, they had built something magnificent, something that would last long after they were gone. Ava had once been the woman abandoned, the one left behind. But now, she was the woman who had built an empire, a queen in her own right, with the love and respect of the man who had always been by her side. As they looked around the hotel, they realized they were no longer just building a business, they were building a legacy that would inspire future generations to believe that no matter how deep the ashes of your past, you can always rise again. Together. They both knew that their journey wasn't over yet, that there were more challenges to face and more obstacles to overcome, but with each other by their side, there was nothing they couldn't do. Their love had been tested, and it had emerged stronger than ever, cementing the truth that when you rise from the ashes, you don't just rebuild, you transform. Ava had learned that no matter how hard life had been, she had the strength to keep going, to fight for what she believed in, and to make her dreams come true. She and Liam were not just survivors, they were victors, building a life not only of wealth but of purpose, and as they stood hand in hand, they knew their legacy was just beginning. The fire of their love burned bright, a beacon for others to see that even when life seems impossible, true love and unwavering dedication can turn the tide. They had proven it, and they would continue proving it, for themselves, for their community, and for the world. And so, as Ava and Liam prepared for their future, they knew that the empire they had built would stand as a testament to their journey, a monument to love, resilience, and transformation. From the depths of despair to the heights of success, they had shown the world that it's not where you start, but how you rise that truly matters. Together, they had built a future that was unshakable. Together, they had risen from the ashes. While Ava and Liam were building an empire from the ground up, Ethan was spiraling down a very different path. What had once been a life of opulence and privilege now seemed to trap him in a cage of excess. The man who had once stood at the pinnacle of success was now buried beneath the weight of his own greed. Ethan had always believed that wealth was everything. He had married a stunning, materialistic woman, Samantha, a blonde bombshell with an insatiable desire for luxury and status. She was beautiful, yes, but she was also driven by the same shallow hunger for more money, more status, more extravagance. It didn't matter how it came. If Ethan had it, she wanted it. And for a while, Ethan was happy to provide, thinking that the life they were living would bring him the fulfillment he sought. But as the years passed, Ethan's once sharp business acumen began to dull. He no longer cared about building his company or making meaningful, sustainable investments. Instead, he spent his days lounging in the most expensive clubs, surrounded by people who indulged him in his every whim. His nights were filled with lavish parties, wild gambling binges, and a steady flow of alcohol and drugs that made him feel invincible. Samantha, ever the opportunist, saw no issue with this lifestyle. She reveled in it. The newest designer clothes, the private jets, the fancy homes, they were her new reality, and she had no interest in slowing down. She never asked where the money was coming from or what the consequences would be down the road. As long as Ethan continued to spoil her, she was content. But what Samantha didn't see, or didn't care to see, was that Ethan's lavish lifestyle was eating him alive. His company, once a thriving enterprise, began to hemorrhage money. His investments turned sour as he poured more and more into reckless ventures, hoping that the next gamble would pay off. He sunk millions into ventures that promised quick returns, but ultimately led to disaster. His corporate empire, built on years of hard work and vision, began to crumble beneath the weight of his mistakes. Ethan's once pristine reputation, built on business success and careful planning, was now tainted by poor choices and reckless behavior. And as the money dwindled, so did the respect others had for him. Business partners pulled away, investors demanded answers, and creditors knocked at his door, threatening to take everything. But even then, Ethan remained in denial. He continued to indulge in his vices, convinced that he could somehow outrun the inevitable. He gambled away more than just his money. He gambled away his future. Samantha, always living in the moment, never questioned Ethan's reckless behavior. As long as her designer bags, private jet rides, and trips to the most exclusive resorts remained intact, she turned a blind eye to the growing pile of debts. In fact, she encouraged Ethan's behavior. She convinced him that the only way to get their fortune back was through even bigger risks. It was an intoxicating cycle. Gambling became their secret escape, their refuge from the mounting pressures of reality. But each time Ethan lost more money, Samantha was right there by his side, whispering that they'd soon be back on top. She didn't care about the repercussions. She didn't care if his company went under. She only cared about the next diamond necklace, the next private event, the next wild party. For Ethan, the thrill of indulgence became a way to escape the shame he felt for losing control of everything he had once held dear. But as his assets dwindled, so did his hope. He watched helplessly as the life he had built, the life he had once held over Ava's head, began to slip away. The house, the cars, the private islands. It was all falling apart piece by piece. Samantha's obsession with wealth only pushed Ethan further into his downward spiral. She never saw him for who he truly was. She saw him only as a means to an end. As his fortune evaporated, so did his sense of identity. The confident, charismatic man who once believed he could conquer anything was now a shadow of himself. He couldn't even face the people he had once been so proud to know. They had all abandoned him, seeing his decline long before he was willing to admit it. The pressure began to mount in ways that Ethan hadn't anticipated. The phone calls from creditors became more frequent, the letters from lawyers piled up, and his once thriving company, the company that had been his pride and joy, teetered on the edge of collapse. Ethan was facing bankruptcy. He had been so consumed by the pursuit of excess that he hadn't even noticed the storm brewing until it was too late. Samantha, ever the opportunist, tried to salvage what she could. She suggested selling off everything, downsizing, liquidating assets, and finding new investors. But Ethan's pride wouldn't allow him to take the necessary steps. He refused to admit he had lost control. He was too proud to ask for help, too proud to admit he had fallen from the pedestal he had so carefully built. At the same time, Samantha, realizing that she couldn't get everything she wanted from the wreckage of Ethan's life, began to distance herself. She became less interested in the daily chaos and more obsessed with finding someone else who could take her to the next level. Ethan had become a shell of the man he once was, and Samantha knew it. With no money, no respect, and no one left by his side, Ethan found himself utterly alone. The reality of his downfall hit him like a ton of bricks. He had once been so sure of his superiority, so convinced that his wealth made him untouchable. But now, as his world came crashing down around him, he realized the terrible truth. He had lost everything that had truly mattered: his integrity, his company, his respect, and most painfully, the love of the woman he had once taken for granted. Ethan's downward spiral wasn't just financial, it was emotional, psychological, and moral. The choices he had made had stripped away his sense of self. He was now a man defined by his mistakes, drowning in a sea of regret. As his company faced bankruptcy, his once wealthy lifestyle crumbled into dust. The parties, the glamour, the attention, all of it had vanished. He was left with nothing, and as he sat in his empty mansion, looking at the life he had once flaunted, he realized with sickening clarity that the man he had become was not the man he once was. He was a man who had lost himself, a man who had been swallowed whole by his own greed and arrogance. Ethan's fall was a slow, agonizing process, one that forced him to confront the truth he had spent years ignoring. He had destroyed everything that had ever mattered to him, all in the pursuit of excess. And in that moment of despair, he would finally come to understand the harshest truth of all. The one person who had truly loved him, who had believed in him, was gone. Ava had moved on, had built a new life, one that was full of love and purpose, while he had sacrificed everything for a fleeting, hollow existence. The weight of his own choices would never allow him to escape the regret that gnawed at him. As Ethan sat amidst the wreckage of his life, he would remember Ava, not with bitterness, but with a deep, sorrowful realization that she had always been the one who truly mattered. And though it was too late to win her back, Ethan could only hope that, in time, he would find a way to rebuild not his wealth, but his sense of self. But for now, it seemed, the greedy man had finally fallen. Ethan sat in his office, the walls that had once gleamed with polished perfection, now reflecting the weight of his mistakes. His mind raced, yet everything felt like a blur. The papers on his desk were filled with red ink, letters from creditors, notices of unpaid loans, and reports showing that his company, once a giant in its industry, was now sinking fast. The harsh reality that he had been avoiding for months was finally here. He was going to lose everything. The grand empire he had built, the one that had given him fame, fortune, and power, was crumbling. Ethan had spent years accumulating wealth, using it as a shield against the world. But now, that very wealth had betrayed him. His reckless spending, the lavish parties, the endless trips to the most exclusive destinations, and the gambling, all of it had drained his resources and left him with nothing but debts. His company, once a symbol of his success, was now on the verge of bankruptcy. His partners, who had once trusted him, were pulling out, unwilling to continue investing in a failing business. He had been so sure that the next big deal would fix everything. The next gamble would pay off. But there was no more next. There was no more magic, no more lucky break. All his grand plans had turned to dust, and now he was faced with the cold, brutal truth. He had nothing left. Ethan had always prided himself on his ability to turn things around, to make the impossible happen. But now he could barely even look himself in the mirror. His mind flicked to his wife, Samantha, once the woman who stood by his side, enjoying the fruits of his success. She had been so certain that the money would keep flowing forever, so convinced that their lifestyle would last. But now she was nowhere to be found, too busy with her own pursuits, her own distractions, as his financial ruin became inevitable. The auction announcement. With a heavy heart, Ethan made the painful decision to announce the auction of his company. It was the only way he could salvage a fraction of what he had lost. The thought of auctioning off the very business he had once built from the ground up was humiliating. But it was his only option. He couldn't bring himself to face the employees who had looked up to him, the investors who had trusted him. They would all witness the downfall of the empire he had once promised would stand the test of time. He had failed them all. The day of the auction arrived. Ethan sat in the front row, his usually confident posture slumped with shame. His mind wandered to the countless hours he had poured into growing this company, the sacrifices, the endless nights spent strategizing and making deals, all for nothing. It felt like a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from, a dream turned into a twisted reality. Samantha had not come to the auction. She had chosen to spend her day with friends, at yet another exclusive event, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. It wasn't surprising. She had never been interested in Ethan for who he was, but for what he could give her. And now she had all but abandoned him. As the auctioneer began his speech, Ethan barely heard the words. He could hear the bids being placed, low offers from people who saw nothing more than a decaying business ready to be picked apart. How had it come to this? Once, his name had been synonymous with success, with innovation. Now, it was only a reminder of failure. He couldn't help but think of Ava. In the depths of his despair, his mind often drifted back to her. She had been the one person who had believed in him when no one else did. The woman he had thrown away for nothing more than his own pride. And now, she was gone. She had moved on, and he was left to face the consequences of his own arrogance. The final blow, just as the auction was nearing its end, Ethan's heart nearly stopped. He looked up, and his eyes locked onto a figure standing in the back of the room. He had to blink a few times, unsure of what he was seeing. There, standing with quiet confidence, was Ava. Her presence was a shock to him, but what stunned him even more was the look in her eyes, one of calm determination, not anger, not resentment, but an undeniable strength. She wasn't here to take revenge. She wasn't here to watch him fall. She was here to take back what was once hers, not out of spite, but to show him exactly what he had lost. The bidding war. As the auction continued, Ava made her move. With every bid, she raised the stakes, her hand steady, her expression unwavering. Ethan watched in disbelief as she expertly outbid the others. It was clear she was no longer the broken woman he had left behind. She had transformed into something far stronger, a force to be reckoned with. The auctioneer's voice became a blur as the bidding war escalated. Ethan had never imagined that the woman he had discarded would rise so high. His heart pounded in his chest as Ava placed a final bid that surpassed anything he had expected. She had won. As the room fell silent, Ethan's mind struggled to catch up with the reality of the situation. Ava had just outbid him for his own company. The company he had worked so hard to build was now in her hands. Ethan sat frozen in his chair, the weight of his own choices sinking in deeper than ever. He had always thought he was in control, that his wealth and power would shield him from failure. But now he was confronted with the painful truth. Ava had become the person he should have always valued, the person who had never given up on him, and yet he had pushed her away. As he stood to leave the auction room, his footsteps felt heavy, like they were dragging him toward a future he couldn't escape. He had failed, and there was no one to blame but himself. But even in his despair, part of him couldn't help but admire Ava. She had taken her life back. He had underestimated her strength, and now he was left to face the consequences of that mistake. Ava had won, and Ethan was left with nothing but regret. The day of the auction had arrived, and Ethan felt an anxious tension settle in his chest. He stood before the crowd of potential buyers, his fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. The room buzzed with anticipation as wealthy investors and business moguls gathered, all hoping to get their hands on the company that once held so much promise. Ethan knew it was over. He had already accepted that his empire was slipping through his fingers, but he never expected this. As the auctioneer began his speech, Ethan's eyes scanned the room mechanically. The buzz of conversation faded into the background, and his thoughts became scattered. He couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. His gaze moved from one buyer to the next, each one giving him a nod of recognition or a polite smile. There was no respect left in their eyes, just cold business dealings. They saw him as a failure. And then, just as Ethan was about to turn his attention back to the proceedings, something, or rather someone, stopped him dead in his tracks. He felt a sharp intake of breath, as if the air had been sucked out of his lungs. There, standing near the back of the room, was Ava. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had to blink several times to ensure he wasn't seeing things. Was it really her? It had been years since they had last seen each other, and she had faded from his life so completely that he had never thought he would cross paths with her again. But there she was, standing with an air of grace and quiet authority. Gone was the broken woman who had stood by him in their earlier years. This Ava was different. She exuded a confidence that seemed to light up the room, and her presence commanded attention. Her posture was poised, and her eyes, those eyes, looked sharp and focused, as if she was ready to take on the world. Ava was no longer the girl he had once taken for granted. The years had changed her. The woman before him was radiant, powerful, and far wealthier than he had ever imagined. Ethan had always viewed himself as the one in control, the one who held all the power. But now he was looking at the woman who had surpassed him in every way. The power shift. Ethan swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her. Ava was not just standing in the back of the room, she was standing at the very center of the storm that had once been his life. He could see the strength in her stance, the way she looked at him, not with hatred, but with a quiet understanding of her worth. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Ethan's mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing. Why was Ava here? His eyes flickered toward the auctioneer, who continued speaking, unaware of the emotional turmoil playing out in Ethan's chest. His thoughts went back to their past, The love they had once shared, the promise they made to one another, the life they had built together. But those memories now felt so distant, so foreign. He had been so certain that he could live without her, convinced that his wealth and success would shield him from needing anyone. But now, standing there before him, Ava was the one holding all the cards. Ethan's chest tightened as realization hit him like a slap across the face. Ava was here to bid on his company. The rising tension. As the auction began, Ethan tried to shake off the shock of seeing her, but the knot in his stomach only tightened. Ava didn't move, didn't speak, yet her presence was impossible to ignore. She stood with an air of quiet authority, her gaze unwavering as the auction proceeded. Ethan had to fight the urge to look back at her again and again. With every bid that was placed, the tension in the room rose. The wealthy buyers eyed each other, carefully calculating their offers. But Ethan's attention remained fixed on Ava. There was something about the way she stood, so confident and poised, that made his palms sweat. It was as if she already knew what she was doing. She was in control now, not him. When Ava's first bid came, Ethan's heart nearly stopped. It was a modest offer, but the way she said it, so calm, so assured, sent a ripple of shock through him. She wasn't just participating, she was in it to win it. For a moment the room seemed to fall silent. Ethan's mind spun as he watched her make her move. She wasn't desperate like the others. She wasn't trying to reclaim what she had lost. Ava was there because she wanted to. She had a plan, and she was executing it with quiet precision. The final moment. The bidding war escalated quickly, but Ethan felt like he was watching it all in slow motion. His world felt off-kilter as he heard the bids climbing higher and higher. Each offer, each raise, felt like a punch in the gut. This wasn't supposed to happen. The other bidders began to slow down, sensing that they were outmatched. Ethan could hardly believe what was unfolding. It was clear now that Ava was not just participating in the auction. She was here to take what was once his. With a final, confident offer, Ava placed the highest bid. The auctioneer hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by the audacity of the offer. Then, with a smile, he called the bid. Ava had won. Ethan stood motionless, his mind reeling. He couldn't believe it. The woman he had once discarded, the woman he had dismissed as nothing more than a temporary companion, had now outbid him for his own company. The very empire he had built was now in her hands, and all he could do was watch. As the realization sank in, Ethan was filled with an overwhelming sense of defeat. Ava had come back, stronger than ever, and she had taken everything from him, not with bitterness, but with quiet power and dignity. She had beaten him, not with anger, but with the grace and intelligence he had once taken for granted. In that moment, as their eyes briefly met across the room, Ethan understood. He had underestimated her. He had always believed that his wealth and status made him untouchable. But Ava had shown him the true meaning of strength. She had built something far greater than he ever could, a life not defined by money, but by love, respect, and determination. And as he stood there, paralyzed by the reality of his own failure, he couldn't help but feel a surge of regret. He had lost everything. The room was thick with tension as the auctioneer called for the final bid. The wealthy buyers, who had been fiercely competing for the company, now hesitated, but Ava, unwavering and resolute, made her move, placing the highest bid, securing the company Ethan had once cherished so dearly. The auctioneer paused, scanning the room one last time, before declaring her the winner. The shock that washed over Ethan was almost palpable. His breath caught in his throat, his body rigid as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. He could feel his pulse pounding in his ears, the weight of his failure bearing down on him like a crushing wave. Ava had won. He stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to make sense of the reality unfolding before him. How could this be? In his wildest dreams, he never imagined that the woman he had discarded, his once beloved wife, the one he had treated with such cold indifference, would rise above him. He had thought she would struggle, falter, and eventually fade into obscurity. But she hadn't. She had fought, she had thrived, and now she had taken everything from him. Ava wasn't the broken woman he remembered. She wasn't the one who had cried herself to sleep or begged for his love. She had found strength in the depths of despair and had built herself into a force to be reckoned with. And now she was standing at the top while he was drowning in his own mistakes. Ethan's thoughts spiraled into a vortex of regret and disbelief. How had he been so blind? He had been so consumed by his own sense of superiority, so sure that his wealth and status made him untouchable, that he had failed to see Ava for the incredible woman she was. She had never been the one lacking, it had always been him. The moment of reckoning. Ava's eyes met Ethan's across the room, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name: humiliation. He had been the one to discard her, to turn his back on the woman who had once stood by him through thick and thin. And now, here she was, flourishing, thriving, and showing him just how far he had fallen. The sting of her gaze was almost too much to bear. Ethan had always prided himself on being the one in control, the one who held all the cards. But as he stood there, watching Ava take what was once his, he realized how wrong he had been. She had never needed him. She had only wanted him, and when he had failed to see her worth, she had walked away, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to prove herself. Ava had always been his equal, and in that moment it became clear that she had far surpassed him. She didn't need his wealth or his validation. She had built something far more powerful, something that didn't rely on superficial status or empty riches. The realization hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. The life he had once known, his extravagant parties, his luxurious lifestyle, his reputation, was crumbling before his eyes. Ava was no longer just a footnote in his life. She had become his ultimate payback. The final blow. As the auction concluded, Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. Ava was now the proud owner of his company, the very empire he had built with his own hands. But more than that, she was the one who had outlasted him. She had triumphed over the betrayal, over the heartache he had caused, and now she had taken the very thing he had once valued most. Ethan had no words, no arguments, no justifications. All he could do was watch as Ava walked up to the auctioneer, her expression calm and collected, as if this moment was nothing more than another business transaction. There was no bitterness in her eyes, no triumph to be found in the way she carried herself. She didn't need to gloat. She had already won. As the auctioneer handed her the official documents, Ava glanced at Ethan once more. Her gaze was steady, unwavering. For a brief moment their eyes locked, and in that silent exchange, Ethan saw something that shattered him: mercy. Ava didn't need to rub her victory in his face. She didn't need to remind him of everything he had lost. But as she turned to leave, her words, soft, deliberate, hung in the air, cutting through him like a knife. "I didn't come here for your company, Ethan," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I came here to show you what you lost when you chose to walk away from me. You never saw my worth. You never saw me as your equal. But I'm here now, and I'm thriving. And that's the ultimate payback." Ethan was left speechless, his mind reeling as the weight of her words sank in. He had been the one who failed to see the woman he had married for who she truly was, and now he was the one left in the ruins of his own arrogance. The fall from grace. As Ava left the room, her victory complete, Ethan was left standing in the silence that followed. The applause for her success echoed in his ears, but it didn't matter. In the end, Ava had taken everything from him, not through cruelty, but through strength, dignity, and resilience. And Ethan, once the man at the top of the world, was left with nothing but the bitter taste of his own downfall. The empire he had built, the wealth he had accumulated, and the status he had clung to for so long were now nothing more than fleeting memories. He had lost it all, and it was all his own doing. As Ava's silhouette disappeared from the doorway, Ethan realized the truth that he had tried so hard to avoid. He had never been in control. Ava had always been the one who held the true power, and now, in the end, she was the one who had claimed her rightful place, while he was left to face the consequences of his own choices. The room was still, the weight of the moment pressing on Ethan's chest like a heavy stone. The paperwork was before him, the final transfer of ownership. He had seen Ava win the auction, had seen her triumph in ways he never thought possible. But as he sat there, the reality of it all began to sink in. His life, his empire, his status had all crumbled, and now Ava was standing at the very top. And yet, there was something about the way she held herself, the way she was poised, that left him feeling completely stripped bare. He had never felt so small. The auction was over, the final deal made, but Ethan still couldn't reconcile the truth. Ava had done what he never thought she would. She had surpassed him. And it wasn't just in business, it was in life. It was in the way she carried herself with grace and strength, the way she had rebuilt everything after he had thrown her away. He had expected her to fail, but she hadn't. She had flourished while he had withered in his own selfishness. As Ethan shuffled through the papers in front of him, his mind raced. He was supposed to finalize the transaction, to sign the documents, and officially let go of what he had worked so hard to build. But when he looked up, Ava was standing there, her eyes focused, unwavering. She didn't look angry. She didn't look smug. She just looked calm, dignified. And as she approached him, the words she spoke next hit him harder than anything he had ever felt in his life. "I don't want your company, Ethan," she said, her voice smooth but heavy with truth. "I only came to show you what you lost." Her words hung in the air, their weight settling deep into his soul. Ethan's hand faltered as he reached for the pen to sign the papers. This was the moment. He had built everything on the assumption that he was the one in control, that his wealth and power made him untouchable. But Ava had never needed him to validate her. She had built herself. She had rebuilt her life, and she had done it without him. Ava stepped closer, and for the first time, Ethan saw the woman he had once loved in a new light. This was not the woman who had cried for his affection. This was not the woman who had begged for his attention. This was the woman who had moved beyond him, who had seen through his arrogance and had come out stronger for it. The woman he had failed to recognize. "You left me because of my skin," Ava continued, her voice now soft but laced with emotion. "But you never recognized my heart. You never saw me for who I really am." Each word was a dagger, carving its way into Ethan's heart. His breath caught, his throat tight, as her words peeled back the layers of his pride and arrogance. He had never truly seen her. He had never truly seen the depth of her strength, the power of her love. Instead, he had discarded her, believing that his wealth and status could shield him from the consequences of his actions. But in truth, it was he who was lacking. "I was never the one lacking, Ethan," she said, each syllable punctuated with finality. "You were." And just like that, Ava turned to leave. Ethan stood frozen, the words echoing in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. I was never the one lacking. He had thought he had it all, wealth, beauty, power, respect. But in the end, he had nothing. He had lost the one thing that had truly mattered. As Ava's footsteps faded, Ethan was left standing there, the papers still clutched in his trembling hands, his heart racing in his chest. The air felt thick with regret, and for the first time in years, he realized the depth of his mistake. Ava had shown him the truth, That love wasn't something you could buy. It wasn't about power or money. It was about respect, care, and recognizing the value of the person standing before you. And now, Ava was gone, leaving him to face the bitter reality of what he had lost. For the first time, Ethan understood the weight of what he had done. He had discarded love in favor of luxury. He had chosen status over sincerity, and now he had nothing. Ava had walked away, leaving him with nothing but the painful reminder of the woman he had let slip through his fingers, and in that moment he realized the greatest lesson of all. True wealth wasn't measured in dollars or possessions. It was measured in the love and respect you gave and received, and he had lost it all. As he looked down at the papers before him, Ethan knew there was no way to undo the damage he had caused. He had taken everything for granted, and now he would spend the rest of his life regretting the choice he had made. Ava had won, not because she had outbid him, but because she had outgrown him. She had taken everything that mattered, her dignity, her heart, and her strength. And as she walked away, Ethan was left to face the cold, hard truth. He had lost the one thing that could never be replaced. Ava had moved on, and all that was left for him was the hollow emptiness of his own greed and regret. Ava stepped into the warm, inviting embrace of the home she had built with Liam, a home that was more than just walls and a roof. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for, everything she had earned. She closed the door behind her, and for a moment she simply stood there, breathing in the familiar scent of comfort and peace. This was where her heart had always belonged, in a place where she was loved for who she was, not for what she could offer. This was where she had found true happiness, a love that had never asked for anything but her heart. The memories of her past with Ethan felt like distant shadows, fading with every passing day. That time had once consumed her, the late nights alone, the empty words, the cold indifference. But now it was nothing more than a chapter she had long closed. The pain had been a teacher, a cruel one at times, but one that had shown her her worth and her strength. She had survived it all, not by leaning on others, but by trusting herself and her ability to rise above the heartbreak. Liam was already waiting for her, standing by the kitchen island, his smile warm and genuine as he saw her walk in. He didn't need to ask her about the day's events. He knew her well enough to understand the weight she carried from the past, the hurt, the betrayal, the struggle. But he also knew that she was strong enough to handle it. He had always believed in her, even when she had doubted herself. "Welcome home," he said softly, his voice filled with love and reassurance. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close as if to shield her from the world outside, from the man who had once been her husband but was now nothing more than a distant memory. In his embrace, Ava could feel the warmth of true love, a love that asked nothing from her, but to be herself, to feel safe, to feel cherished. Ava leaned into Liam's embrace, feeling the safety and warmth he provided, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness she had felt with Ethan. With Liam, there was no pretension, no arrogance, just a pure and unshakable love that had flourished in the quiet moments, in the shared struggles and victories. She had never known a love so steady, so kind. It wasn't flashy or grandiose, but it was everything she needed. With him, she had finally found the peace she had always craved. "I can't believe how far we've come," Ava whispered, her voice tinged with emotion as she pulled back to look at him. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingers, her eyes soft but filled with admiration. "You've given me more than I ever imagined, more than I ever thought I deserved." Liam smiled, his eyes full of quiet pride. "No, Ava," he said gently, cupping her face in his hands. "You've given yourself everything. I'm just lucky enough to be by your side." Her heart swelled at his words. It was the truth. Liam had always seen her, truly seen her. He saw her strength, her vulnerability, her beauty, inside and out. He had never once tried to change her. He had never demanded anything from her other than to be herself. And in return, she had given him all of herself, her love, her trust, her heart. They had built something real, something unshakable. As she stood there in his arms, Ava realized that the pain and loss she had experienced with Ethan had not been in vain. It had led her here, to this moment of peace and fulfillment. She had learned the hardest lessons, the lessons of self-worth, of recognizing what truly mattered, and now she was living them every day. With Liam, she had found a love that was grounded in respect, not in superficial things. Their love was not built on wealth or status, but on something far more enduring: mutual care, trust, and a shared vision of the future. The thought of Ethan, of his empty pursuit of wealth and shallow desires, seemed so distant now. She had once thought that she needed his approval, that she needed to fit into his world, but now she saw the truth so clearly. His world had been built on fragile foundations, and it had crumbled under the weight of his own greed and arrogance. Ava had learned that love was not something that could be bought or manipulated. It was something that had to be nurtured, respected, and cherished. And with Liam, she had found that. She had found the love that was meant for her all along, the kind of love that didn't fade or wither with time, but grew stronger with each passing day. As they stood together, holding one another in the comfort of their home, Ava felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. She had done it. She had rebuilt her life, not just with success and wealth, but with the love and respect she had always deserved. Ethan's world had collapsed, but hers had only grown stronger. And now she knew that no matter what happened in the future, she had something far more valuable than anything money could buy: the unwavering, unconditional love of a man who had never seen her as anything other than his equal. "I love you, Liam," she said, her voice steady and full of certainty. Liam's eyes softened, and he pulled her closer, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "I love you, Ava. Always have. Always will." Together they had proven that true love wasn't about external validation or fleeting desires. It wasn't about the things you could own or the status you could achieve. It was about the people who stood beside you, who believed in you, and who loved you for exactly who you were. And as the days turned into months, and the months into years, Ava and Liam continued to thrive. Their hotel empire expanded, their dreams realized, but more importantly, their love remained unshaken. Through every challenge, every success, and every quiet moment at home, they proved that love, real, true, enduring love, was all that mattered. And as Ethan languished in his regret, lost in the emptiness of his choices, Ava and Liam thrived, their bond growing stronger with every passing day. The love that truly lasted had nothing to do with the riches of the world or the glamour of fame. It had everything to do with loyalty, respect, and the unwavering belief that together anything was possible. Ava had finally found the love she had always deserved, and it was more than enough.